Hey, and welcome to the Growth Whisperers podcast, where everything we talk about relates to building enduring great companies. Not good companies, not mediocre companies, but great companies that you're proud of and continue if you want them to for generations and generations. I'm Kevin Lawrence, and I'm here with my awesome co-host Brad Giles. Brad, how's it going?
It's going excellent. Thank you. Lovely to see you on this fine day where it's autumn or fall in the Northern Hemisphere and spring in the Southern Hemisphere. So we're both good.
Yes, and it was a beautiful day today. Absolutely beautiful. So, what's the phrase or the word on your mind today, Brad?
Security. Okay. So the second...
Like old age security? Or are you hoping to be getting your pension soon?
No.
Oh, that's not what you mean. Okay.
No. AT&T is a telecommunications provider, right? They provide mobile services, and etc. So the second largest provider in Australia is called Optus, and all of their user data was hacked. So
Nice.
driver's license, all of the private information, every single thing.
Beautiful.
Millions, tens of millions of records have been hacked and stolen. So yeah, what's on my mind? Security. How tight is your company's security? Because if a massive telco can get hacked like that, it's always an ongoing job. What about yourself, Kev?
It is. And I know a few companies that have been seriously hacked, and it's devastating. And afterwards, they find that the security wasn't as good as they thought it was once they pressure tested it, which is unfortunate. Mine is retreat. Just came off my team retreat. We had just about 3 days up in Whistler. The whole team came in. I think there was 13 of us. And, just the idea of being together with a bunch of brilliant minds. And as I was sharing with you, one of the major side benefits I didn't realize is everyone facilitates part of the meeting in all kinds of different ways. And everyone's kind of showing their best skills. I've been doing this for 28 years, and I learned some amazing things. One guy, Brett, on my team, did this basic facilitation technique that was so basic, but it was like double mastery. And I mean, the whole team did awesome stuff. And then, Dean did this other technique about bringing the customer into the strategic planning in a way I've never seen. And we've got a new guy, Tim, and this exercise he had the team do for team building and engagement in 3 minutes just blew my mind. Like I can go on and on and on, but just getting together in a house for 3 days, learning, growing, sharing, building relationships, laughing. It's just, it's a polar opposite to the security. Security is about, they're both about sharing information widely, just to a different end or with a different motivation. Anyways, so security retreat or retreat to security. I don't know, but anyways, good times. All right, well, let's jump right into today. Today we're talking about something that's really important in these turbulent times. We're still in this state of not really sure what's going on, but interest rates are going up. Inflation's creeping down in some areas, in some ways. What are we in for? And it's looking like it's going to be challenging in many sectors, and that's fine. That's part of a transition and a cycle of an economy. But we're talking about this thing called the Stockdale Paradox. Brad, you want to kind of walk us through what we're talking about here?
Sure thing. So Stockdale Paradox comes from our good friend Jim Collins, and it comes from Jim Stockdale, who was a prisoner of war in a Vietnam prisoner of war camp, obviously during the Vietnam War. And he observed the people who would survive and the people who would die. And of course, Jim uses this as an analogy for companies that works quite effectively, that he calls the Stockdale Paradox. So how Jim describes it on his website: you must maintain unwavering faith that you can and will prevail in the end, regardless of the difficulties, and at the same time have the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. And so this tells us that during turbulent times, we must, A, believe and maintain belief that we will prevail, and yet at the same time confront the brutal facts of the situation. Because here's the problem: many leaders just will stick their head in the sand, or they'll get caught up in other things, or they won't confront the brutal facts. They'll just let them kind of glide along.
Or they'll just be too positive.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the similar story, I was just searching it up here as you were talking, is, Viktor Frankl in his awesome book, Man's Search for Meaning, which I read 20 years ago. It was recommended, highly, highly recommend it. And, this is, as a prisoner in the Nazi concentration camps in World War II. And he just, described the method that he noticed that the people that thought they were going to be out, by the end of the year or Christmas, as somebody has said. Well, and again, most of those people there weren't, Christians, but or people, not necessarily. Actually, I could be wrong on that. I'll take that back. I don't know that, but I believe many of them were. But the fact is, the people that thought they'd be out by the end of the year often died because psychologically they were attached and fixated on a certain timeline, and when the timeline moved, it destroyed their mindset.
Yeah.
And in Man's Search for Meaning, is he talks about a very similar principle. And it's about being able to endure challenging things and having the right mindset, which is not just completely positive. It's, it's acknowledging what's going on. It's almost like patient and positive at the same time.
My favorite part of that book, Man's Search for Meaning, is the way that he describes humanity. And he said there is a gap between stimulus and response. And that gap, that pause, is humanity. And so if there is a stimulation, and he was using it in the example, for example, of being whipped by a Nazi guard, or being, assaulted, or whatever it might be, the pause before you react, that's where humanity is. Because, for example, a dog might just turn around and bite or snap or growl. Correct. Or whatever. That's not humanity. So humanity is pausing and contemplating. Yeah.
That's also the best leaders have mastered that aspect of humanity. It's contemplating your actions instead of reaction. So the root of both of those is that the optimists don't survive, the pessimists don't prevail. It's generally the optimists who acknowledge the relevant brutal facts who prevail. And that those are the people. But in these times, as there becomes more brutal facts, we got to be careful not to get lost in it, because some people slip to being too negative or too conservative. And people often go in two different camps. People become super blindly optimistic, and they lose the trust and faith of their people, because the people are like, well, that's not relevant. Then there's the people who become really negative and really go in a protectionist kind of mode and become very conservative or overly conservative. And that often doesn't work either. It's about playing both of those things at once, dealing with the brutal facts and still retaining the optimism that you're going to thrive going forward. It just might be a little bit bumpy for a little bit.
I've run so many sessions with teams where we've needed to confront the brutal facts. And one of the keys is, are you confronting the brutal facts or opinions? Because a lot of people come to a lot of people come to these situations, these meetings, with their opinions, and you've got to distill or strip that down and say, is that really a fact? For example, a fact is how much cash we've got in the bank. That's definitely not an opinion. Our accounts receivable days, they might be closer to an opinion. Now, the data might tell us something, but sometimes those customers tend to not pay.
And our cash projections based on the best information we have is close to a fact, although there's still some tolerance in it. But a lot of people bring brutal opinions. And, one of the things Jim taught us in one of the sessions is you make a list of your brutal facts. And then with your top brutal facts, you list the facts. Then you debate them. Because sometimes those brutal facts aren't actually brutal facts. They're actually way off. But you want to dig in. So I'll give an example. So one of the CEOs we work with, recently we had one of our strat planning sessions, and he was talking about, the 3-year vision of the company. It was kind of funny because, The 3-year vision is tremendous growth. But so we started talking about the interest rates, the impact on their local economy, their industry specific economy, and all the things that are kind of at play with the best facts he had. And he had some awesome facts. And then he talked about the growth plans. And at one point, it was funny because, I said to him, well, this goal to more than double in 3 years is aggressive. And it might take 4 or 5, but we are going to get there. And he goes, maybe we need a new coach. He says, if the coach isn't believing in our plan, we got ourselves a problem. And he and I get along great. And we joke, wait, yeah, let's bring in the fresh guy, get me out of here. And we laughed about it and joked about it. But the point of it is, and he knows it's going to be a 3 to 5 year plan. He likes to think 3 because he wants to have the right thinking in the company. But the point of it is, he was reviewing all of the other brutal facts in process as he was setting the table for this discussion about the awesome opportunities at the same time. So it's both together, which has a lot more credibility. And I'll give you one more, though. Different situation. It was really challenging. It was a father-son team in a business. And the father always had challenges with his son because the son was so optimistic, because the son had considered every possible brutal fact in every deal they did. He'd already thought it forward, backward, backwards, upside down, and sideways. And he would be so positive about all of the outcomes, it would freak the dad out. The dad's going, he's just being blindly optimistic. And that's lethal in business. So we had a deep conversation one night, the 3 of us, helping him to work some stuff out. And I said to the son, it seems like you are blindly optimistic. He goes, oh my gosh, no, let me tell you my plan. And he goes through 14 different variables and his plan B and C for every single variable that he has mitigated. So he had thought of every brutal fact and optimistically pushing ahead. He just didn't communicate it. So he didn't have credibility, in this case, with his own father. So then what he learned is to share, here's the brutal facts and here's the plans I have. Now we can be optimistic on top of that base of truth and reality. It was really, so he did it brilliantly. He just didn't articulate it, and he didn't get the credibility he needed to be able to get buy-in to go ahead.
Yeah. I remember another story with a team that I work with. Their market had dropped, and it was the worst market drop in living memory. And all the old guys in the industry said, never seen anything as bad as this. And so we needed to make some changes, as is often the case. It was definitely external factors. Everyone in the industry felt it. And we needed to basically trim up the profit and loss, make some cuts. And it was the fact that it was the perspective of the owner that got us through, I guess. In fact, there's been a couple of these examples, but it's this perspective and the ability to, even though they're so emotional through those things, to say, and this is where a coach comes in handy, to be able to say, okay, this is what's going on. And we just kind of, without that emotion, okay, what are the facts? What's happening? We will endure, but we can't endure unless we make these cuts, or we can't endure unless we do these changes. And so, knowing that we're in turbulent times, knowing that, we may need to make some changes, but we're not going to know that unless we confront those brutal facts.
Yeah, and it's just credibility and versus just the raw optimism, which doesn't work. The other thing to really think about in these times too, I remember when I was in the Middle East in 07, 08, and I'm heading back there again this week. I'm really excited to head back. But 07, 08, and and like real estate values fell 50% in 3 weeks. It was brutal, absolutely brutal. And people were freaked out about all kinds of things. Thankfully, our clients, we had good strategy execution, good budgeting and financial. We had all the right things in place to do well, and we did very well through it. But the one thing we kept talking about, and the chairman would talk about, the CEOs would talk about, is the BHAG. We stayed resolute and strong. Our BHAG is still our BHAG.
Yeah.
And yes, we're going through this, and we're still gonna get there. We're just in a little bit turbulent times, and it gave people something to hold on to.
Yeah.
knowing that the vision does and not change.
Yeah.
The path might change a little bit, timeline might change a little bit, or might not,
Yeah.
but the vision, that our purpose, our values, our BHAG that we're driving towards, it's all there. And in many ways, the 3 to 5 year plan, again, it's like the principles don't change. Short-term tactics might, but like for most of these companies, it's rock solid. So that gives people confidence that there's a lot of change, in the short term and, kind of near and close, but in the medium to long term, nothing changes or nothing major changes unless we have to tweak our strategy a little bit.
There's no industry, as far as I can tell, that consistently grows at the same rate. Everything is it surges up and then it pairs back. It's semi-cyclical. I've spoken to you before about this.
Yeah.
I live in a cyclical economy because it's based around mining, and mining is fed off the commodity price. So here we just have to sort of say the words, look, if we zoom out, we know we're in a cycle and we know that things are going to go up and things are going to go down. So we've just got to confront the brutal facts of our point in the cycle. What's going to happen and where are we going to go?
Right.
We will prevail, but we've got to be ready for what's coming.
Yeah. And just make sure that you still get people rallied up towards what you can do. So here's kind of like just a kind of handful of points that we made. Like, admit that it's challenging times. Remind people of long-term vision like we just talked about and reconnect them with it. Don't get lost in the short term. That is dangerous. Remind people of all our strengths and opportunities that we have. Take a look at those specific challenges and brutal facts, like acknowledge the ones and pick the ones that we need to address that are relevant to us right now. And make sure people have tangible actions to take. Like in most of the companies we work with, we cascade it so people have, their individual top 3 to 5 goals to accomplish every quarter. But make sure people have tangible goals that they can use to help the company march towards it. And just be really careful with stretch targets. Stretch targets are generally juvenile. And, you can have your base target that you commit to when you set your budget to. And you could say that we could have you just don't want your base target to be a crazy stretch, because then you're generally demotivated. You're also going to screw up the financials of the company because investments are made on budgets. But if you want to rally your team about, hey, it'd be fun to overachieve a goal, that's one thing. Just be careful about overstretching people, because people can get, demotivated. Even though some people love it. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, this stuff's not basic. It's just really remind yourself that this and acknowledge that it's challenging and there's a bit of a storm, and that's fine. We're set up for it, and let's deal with the ugly issues we got to deal with. Let's plug the holes in our boat, and let's put those sails up and power through this thing and get stronger and better on the other side.
But you can only do that if you're slightly optimistic and you're confronting the brutal facts.
Yes.
That that and those brutal facts are covering off what needs to be done. Awesome.
Exactly. It's funny. We were at the racetrack recently, I mentioned before, and it's like, when you're on the racetrack, you're optimistic that you can be fast and pass your opponents that are in front of you to advance towards the front of the pack. But we still go out with a lot of productive paranoia and we or other people double check things on our cars before we go on the track. And you're still running both systems. I'm optimistic I can pass them, and I'm being a little bit pessimistic or careful that I don't crash while I'm passing them. It's like you're managing the gas pedal and the brake always at the same time. That's what driving a race car or a street car is about.
Yeah.
And if you're all gas, you're in trouble. And if you're all brake, you might as well pull over on the side of the road and step out of the race or the game or the business. You got to be managing the gas and the brake continually, ideally without overheating the system.
Yeah. You've got to be able to deal with the situation and not hope that something is going to happen, because hope will lead you to disaster. All right.
Well said.
Very good chat. Yeah. It's turbulent times. There's a lot of things outside of our control. Come back to analyzing, understanding the brutal facts. Be optimistic, not a pessimist, not an optimist who confronts the brutal facts. Very good. Thanks for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast. I'm Brad Giles, and you can find me at evolutionpartners.com.au. And I produce a weekly newsletter, as does Kevin, produce a weekly newsletter at lawrenceandco.com. For the video version, go to youtube.com. Hope that you've enjoyed this episode and have yourself a great week.